Dead Men's Boots is the third in the Felix Castor novels, and it represents an escalation in some ways from the earlier two. We start with Castor at the funeral of a fellow exorcist, John Gittings, who we've met briefly in The Devil You Know, the first Castor novel. And John Gittings has committed suicide with a shotgun. He's actually put the shotgun in his own mouth and pulled the trigger. So it's a horrible, traumatic death. And Castor finds himself consoling the widow. But this being a world where the dead very frequently don't stay dead, or at least don't stay in the grave, Castor finds that John Gittings' spirit has come back to haunt his widow and to lodge itself in the house where they lived when he was alive. And whereas John in life was a fairly placid sort of man, in death he appears to have gone geist, as the saying is. He's become a vengeful and destructive spirit that sort of wreaks havoc wherever it shows up. And this is disturbing in itself. But then there are other things that start to happen which suggest that in the last days of his life, Gittings was investigating something which was too big for him, that he'd taken on a case which had ramifications that he couldn't deal with, and there may be much more to his death than meets the eye. At the same time, Castor is approached by the wife of a man who's been charged with a rape and murder, and she wants him to prove her husband's innocence. She claims that these crimes were not committed by her husband, but by the ghost of an American serial killer, Miriam Seaforth Cale. And although this suggestion initially seems grotesque and unlikely, there does seem to be a fair amount of evidence that there was a ghost at least present at the murder, and so Castor agrees to take the case on. But the more he looks into it, the more things seem to escalate, and the more widespread the conspiracy seems to be. There are a lot of people who know a lot more about this than he does, and they're determined to block his investigation by any means possible. In the end, in order to reach any kind of understanding of what's happening, Castor has to go way outside his comfort zone. He has to travel with the succubus Juliet to Alabama, to Miriam Seaforth Cale's home and stamping ground, and try to put together past and present in a way that makes some kind of sense.